Tonight, welcome to our study. As you are seated, if you're here for the first time, let me do that. If you're here for the first time, would you raise your hand for us tonight? You're here for the very first time. Anyone here? Right over there in the back. Anyone else? Let's welcome them tonight. Just give them a welcome. All right, I'm going to give you some in the news, and somebody reminded me about telling you what the news stands for because I said it last night in my Bible study on Wednesday night, and he said people didn't know it. So I'm not sure if you know this or not, but the word news is an acronym. It means north, east, west, and south. How many of you did not know that? All right, so there you go. Now we can say a prayer and we can go. Because you've learned everything. So that's what it means. It means you're gathering things from the north, east, west, and south. So it's an acronym. So let me give you some of the north, east, west, and south news tonight. So networks give less than 1 minute to House committee's no collusion findings. On Monday, the House Intelligence Committee closed its inquiry into Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election, much to the chagrin of liberal media. The committee confirmed that the Russians were indeed trying to cause chaos in the election, claiming they weren't out to help candidate Donald Trump, specifically, and that there was no collusion between Trump campaign and Russia. But during their evening broadcast, ABC, CBS, and CBS downplayed the findings while NBC ignored them. Now think about this. For one solid year, that's all you heard on these channels. One solid year, they were talking about collusion and Trump and Russia. And then the findings come out, and they say there were no collusion, and you hear nothing. Let me tell you what they said. CBS Evening News gave 31 seconds to the House Committee's findings. Republicans on the House, they said, Intelligence Committee said there was no collusion or coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia during the 2016 election. That's reported by anchor Jeff Glor. He also said this. They also say that while Russia tried to interfere with the election, they do not agree with the U.S. intelligence that the Russians were trying to help Donald Trump. So meanwhile, ABC's World News Tonight, they only gave them 27 seconds, which means the three major network outlets, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and you all know what they stand for, don't you? Another baloney communication. No better coverage. And even got to throw CNN in there, certainly not newsworthy. And CBS says, can't believe the spin. So here you go. Here's what they said. There's late word coming in from the House Intelligence Committee that they're moving up to wrap up their Russia investigation. Republicans on the committee saying that they have found no evidence of collusion. That was all that the anchor David Muir, chief White House correspondent, said. And so we have these not just fake news, it's actually no news. And so we're watching it. This is about, by the way, what they did is they spent, I turned into CBS, and they spent the entire time not talking about that, but talking about Donald Trump and his school safety program. How many of you saw the news today? Just to give you an example, how many saw the news today of the bridge that collapsed, the walking bridge that collapsed? That was big news. I turned CNN on. I was on Fox and I had it. I turned CNN on right before I came here, and they didn't say one single word about it. They were pounding Donald Trump again because of the Democrats who are going to give a recourse to the Republicans' findings. So they're not giving up. Honestly, they're propaganda machines, and they're continuing to go on. So let me tell you a little bit what's going on also. Oh, this is great news I want to tell you about. Another well-known atheist became a believer yesterday. You know how? He died. He's a believer now. This is someone that didn't believe. Stephen Hawking did not believe in God. He was agnostic, but I promise you that he's a believer now. I promise you he knows exactly who God is now. So one way or the other, every knee will bow. Somebody say amen. And every tongue confess. Let me give you a little bit about Israel and tell you what's happening there. Middle East chessboard, Iran versus Israel. It goes on to say this. It says the Iranians who invented the game of chess, by the way, were exceedingly adept at playing several boards simultaneously, with the winner's prize to be no less than control of the entire Middle East and beyond. The article goes on to say this. Iran has done some really smooth chess playing. They've allowed America to come in, they've allowed Russia to come into Syria, and they've allowed us to get rid of Syria's antagonist, which is ISIS, and some of the other groups that are there. In the meantime, we know that Iran has sent weapons to Syria. They have helped the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and basically their goal is to overcome Israel and stay in the Middle East as a prominent role. Iran still wants to have a nuclear weapon. In around 10 years, this article says, when the nuclear deal expires, no country will step in if Iran continues developing nuclear weapons for fear of squandering its vast investments in the Islamic Republic. To replace the banished or killed Sunnis, Iran is importing Shiites. They're they're trying to change Iran to Shiite majority from across the Middle East. They're bringing them in from Pakistan and Afghanistan. To this end, the Iranians enlisted Moscow's help in return to and agreed to Russia's continued presence in the war-torn country. So how does Russia benefit? Well, Russia does not have a warm water seaport. Russia does not have oil, and they're not rich in oil. The Middle East is rich in oil, so Russia wants to be in the Middle East, and Iran's allowing them to come in. Also, through their extensive economic ties with Iran, the Europeans are funding the ethnic cleansing of Syria, and including the tsunami of refugees reaching their shores. So Iran is really pretty much getting rid of anybody they don't want to be there. And we're talking about Islamics that are Shiites, and so they're getting rid of them. So we're watching them, Sunnis, so we're watching them export them, if you will, so they can purify their country and make their next push. And basically what it is they want to have a foothold in Syria to overcome the last obstacle in its path to regional hegemony, which is the control of all of Israel, and that's what their ultimate goal is. And again, they're playing games to do that. So let me give you another article that came out this week. It says, what is a refugee? And this is an interesting article. You got to follow it a little bit to understand it. It says, a visit to Morocco shows that the claim of Palestinians to a right of return has little historic, moral, or legal basis. Jews living in Morocco for centuries, that's northern Africa, by the way, for centuries before Islam came to Casablanca, Fez, and Marrakesh. The Jews, along with the Berbers, were the backbone of the economy and culture. Now their historic presence can be seen primarily in the hundreds and thousands of Jewish cemeteries and abandoned synagogues that are omnipresent in cities and towns throughout the Maghreb. Now they are a remnant in Morocco and gone from other countries. Some left voluntarily to move to Israel after 1948. Many were forced to flee by thousands and because of threats, pogroms, and legal decrees, leaving behind billions of dollars in property and the graves of its ancestors. Today, Morocco's Jewish population is less than 5,000 people, as contrasted with 250,000 in the past. How does all this relate to the Palestinian claim of right to return to their homes in what is now Israel? Well, quite directly. The Arab exodus from Israel in 1948 was the direct result of a genocide war declared against the newly established Jewish state by all its Arab neighbors. So what it's saying is this. The reason why the Arabs left Israel in 1948 is because they declared war on Israel, and Israel won that war. And so they were forced out, some of them. And so it's talking about this, including the Arabs of Israel that were forced out. If they had accepted the UN peace plan, 2 states for 2 people, there would be no Palestinian refugees. Let me tell you what that's saying. When 1948, when 22 aggressive Arab nations declared war on Israel, tiny Israel, outnumbering them 50-1, and Israel miraculously won with the help of God, somebody say amen. There was offered to the Palestinians then, the people that were living, actually they weren't Palestinians at that time, was offered to the Arabs who were defeated that were living in Israel that they could have a state of their own. Israel was all on board with it. 2 states for 2 people. The Arabs refused to have it. Now 70 years later, they're still refusing, and they're wanting to have a 2-state solution their way. Here's their solution. They want Israel out of the land. They want to push them to the sea. It has now been 70 years since this exchange of populations occurred. Is it time to end it's time to end the deadly charade called the displacement of Palestinian refugees. Let me tell you why. There are no Palestinian refugees right now. There's less than 500 Palestinians who were expelled from those lands back then. The people that are Palestinians today never lived in Israel. They always lived in Gaza or Palestine or the Gaza Strip. So they have not been thrown out of anything. Their home has never been Israel. So it's a misnomer to say that there are Palestinian refugees. There's no such thing today as a Palestinian refugee. As a matter of fact, the 500 are all octogenarians. There are people who are not looking to go back anywhere. And the ones that are complaining right now are people who have never had any land or bordering or any living in Israel. So it's a misnomer. Let me give you another one about Israel, what's going on there. Dying church takes time to give a kick to Israel. You have to hand it to the Presbyterian Church USA. That's the PCUSA. Its leaders can't figure out how to recruit new members or stop churches from leaving the denomination in droves. But they sure do know how to run a propaganda war against Israel and its Jewish supporters in the United States. Like the Palestinians for whom the church advocates so irresponsibly, officials and activists in the PCUSA are more intent on attacking Israel and its supporters in the United States than prompting and promoting promoting the welfare of the community they lead. This, in a piece about the church's ongoing collapse, Van Marter's headlines declared that PCUSA membership decline continues, but it's slowing down. This is the leader of the PCUSA. In 2016, the denomination lost almost 50,000 members. In 2015, the church lost 95,000 members from the year before. How did Van Marten spin it? Hey, we lost 5,000 fewer members last year than we did the past year. Still wasn't able to sugarcoat the loss. He's not kidding. In 1993, the church had 3.1 million members. In 2016, it had less than 1.5 million members. The delegates who attended the PCUSA's General Assembly, which will take place in St. Louis in June of 2018, may spend some time talking about this decline and what to do about it, but a lot of their time and energy will be directed at promoting anti-Israeli propaganda to the church's declining membership. One overture already on the agenda directs the General Assembly to affirm the right to criticize practices and policies of Israel without fear of being labeled anti-Semitic. I got a good suggestion for them. I want to show up at their meeting. I want to raise my hand and I want to tell them, listen, if you really want to solve your declining membership, losing half of your population in the last 10 years, if you really want to be able to solve that, I suggest you read Genesis chapter 12, which says that I will bless those nations that bless Israel, and I will curse those nations that curse Israel. Let me give you a prophecy. The church, the Presbyterian Church of the USA, if the Lord should tarry, and I'm not sure he's going to, but if the Lord should tarry in the next 5 years, are going to cease being a denomination. People are fleeing that place as much as you could possibly imagine, and I directly believe it's based on what they're doing to Israel. Let me give you a little bit more as we go on the economy. So I've been talking to you about a cashless society. You're probably sick of hearing me say it, and I've been telling you things of what's happening around the globe, and really there's a lot of places going cashless. But I want to give you this article that came out from Canada this week. More Toronto businesses go cashless. Notice it said more. Cash may still be king in many respects, but plastic is working its way to the throne. That's the next step. A number of businesses are choosing to go cashless, accepting only debit and credit cards, and it's legal in Canada to do so. Flock, a Toronto rotisserie chicken restaurant franchise, went cashless in December in 4 of its 5 Toronto restaurants. After calculating that cash-paying customers only tallied 3% of their sales. On the door of its restaurants, customers are cautioned. We're cashless, debit and credit cards only. According to the Bank of Canada, despite popular belief, merchants don't have to accept cash in Canada. Before I end this, let me tell you what happened to me just recently. I was coming back from preaching in Van Buren, and I was going to Van Buren, and I went to the Birmingham airport. How many of you have ever heard of Birmingham? Birmingham airport, and it was real early, and I wanted to get something to eat for breakfast. So I went to one of the spots that were there to get something to eat for breakfast, and I pulled out my cash, and the guy said to me, "We don't accept cash." He said, "Do you have a credit card?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Would you like to pay with your credit card?" I said, "No." Let me tell you something. When you get that in Birmingham, you know it's coming very, very close. The end of it says this: it is up to the seller to determine the method of payment accepted for transactions. No law requires anyone to accept banknotes or any other form of payment to settle a commercial transaction, said Bank of Canada spokesman Josiane Maynard. So when we talk about cashless, we're not talking about something that's way out there in the distance. It's something that is encroaching more and more, and people are getting used to it. Let me give you a little bit about war and what's happening there. This is interesting because coming in tonight, I saw a drone in the parking lot. How many of you saw it? Yeah. See it? There was somebody flying a drone in the parking lot. And I watched him fly the drone. He may be from the church, I don't know. But I watched him fly the drone. He was way in a truck. How many of you saw it? Yeah. Raise your hand. Way in a truck on the side, and I watched him fly the drone, and I watched the drone, you could hear it, and then I watched it go out of sight, out of his sight. Now, I don't know, maybe it's somebody here that was flying it before you came, but that's illegal according to the United States laws. You have to have a drone in sight. It cannot be out of sight. So it's illegal. I'm sure most people don't know that. That's part of this message tonight of this news article. Listen to this. A February 10th military fracas that involved Syria, Iran, and Israel yielded an impressive amount of destruction. An Iranian drone and command center, Syrian anti-aircraft batteries, and even an Israeli F-16 fighter jet were lost in the escalating clashes. The implication of these hostilities are expansive. Drones have become commonplace in modern warfare, with a mere dozen countries employing armed drones to date. So who do you think was one of the first ones to develop the drone and use it in warfare? Israel. You ready for it? Anybody have any guess? If you were not, now don't answer if you were in my study last night. Anybody have any guess what date it was? What the year was? Take a guess. 1969. In 1969, the Israeli Defense Forces deployed toy airplanes with cameras mounted on them to spy on Egyptian army positions in the Suez Canal. Israel has developed increasingly sophisticated drones, including the Huron TP, which has an 85-foot wingspan and can carry a 1-ton payload. This is a drone, and fly 24 hours. Israel also developed a robotic snake to infiltrate and map tunnels and underground bunkers, as well as unmanned ground vehicles. So Israel's on top of it, but its neighbors are coming on strong. Iran has done something. It has its own drone army now. Actually, the way it has it, it started in 2011 when a downed drone from America went down, and they reverse engineered it. They reverse engineered a US RQ-170 Sentinel drone that crashed in Iran in 2011. Now they reverse engineered it. They created their own drones. Now they're using drones in warfare. And they sold the technology to Hezbollah, which also has drones, and they have them since 2011. So Hezbollah has drones carrying explosive warheads. Some of them were shot down over northern Israel last year. Hamas also has drones, military-grade Iranian drones that they've bought. Houthi rebels. Iran has provided drones, arms, and ballistic missiles to the Houthi rebels fighting against Saudi Arabia in Yemen. And last year, ISIS officially unveiled the unmanned aircraft of the Mujahideen, a new unit mainly comprised of commercial drones that are crudely weaponized. ISIS has mounted several drone attacks, including one in 2016, in which a drone was shot down by Kurdish militia fighters and subsequently exploded. Then it goes on to talk about civilian vulnerabilities. Given the proliferation of drone technology among terrorist organizations, especially those hostile to the West, the long-term implications for civilian populations are sobering. In September 2017, FBI Director Christopher Wray testified before the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee that terrorists overseas now use drones and characterize the threat to the U.S. homeland via drones as imminent. And so how is it imminent? Well, a drone can fly within the radar, under the radar. A drone can fly with obviously some bombs that are there, and it can actually go over a stadium that has 100,000 people in it. It goes on and says the head of the U.S. Air Force said that that is a definite threat to Homeland Security. So we're watching this warfare take another step. And speaking of that, let me give you this one that was in the news this week. This is again for war. Air Force Chief, space war is coming to, it's only a matter of years. General David Goldfein said that American forces will find themselves fighting from space, and that the Pentagon has to prepare for that eventually. In order to be prepared, he said, new weapons and technology will need to be developed and money appropriated for that purpose. He says, I believe we're going to be fighting from space in just a matter of a few short years. And we are the service that must lead the joint war fighting in this new contested domain. This is what the nation demands. He's talking for a new Space Corps. I was listening to one of Donald Trump's speeches that were, I think it was in Pennsylvania, and he was talking about developing a Space Corps like the Air Force. Ironically, the Air Force was the last service branch created after World War II. The Army Air Corps became the Air Force. Experts see a need of a space domain warfighting capability. So we're watching a transitional shift. We're watching a paradigm shift happen, and China knows that. China's already launching satellites for warfare. If we were ever to fight another great power, this says, like China or Russia, it's likely the opening round of battle would be completely silent, as in space no one would hear the other side jamming or even destroying each other's satellites. And so it's obviously coming. Our atmosphere is cluttered with satellites. A lot of them are spy satellites. A lot of them are satellites that are used for warfare. And so it looks like America is a little bit behind the curve there, and he's saying that we need to really do it. Let me give you a little bit more what's going on here as we continue to watch this. This is an article that came in. It says the world unhinged. It's about religion. These stories will remind you that this is not our home, the title says. Did you ever wake up and look at the latest news and find yourself wondering, has the whole world gone mad? How many of you? I have. It takes a lot to get me to that point, this article writer says. I see a lot of strange stuff here on the front lines of the culture wars, but every so often the accumulation of crazy stories strikes a nerve, making me ask myself, have we totally lost our minds? It started again for me a few days back when I saw this now infamous tweet from a Planned Parenthood affiliate in Kentucky declaring some men have a uterus. And in case you didn't get their point, they repeated it on the tweet 11 times. Some men have a uterus, some men have, and he has it written down here. What on earth were they saying? Simply that there are biological females who now identify as males, because of which some men have a uterus. If your head is still spinning, consider this headline. Church of Scotland creates pamphlet to help churches teach transgenderism. And in the pamphlet they say, some men have uteruses. Now just these stories alone would be enough to make one think that the whole world went crazy overnight. But these were just some of the stories that came to my attention in a matter of minutes, with some following a few days later. Over on YouTube channel, someone named Jesus Ruiz took exception to my video asking the question, should drag queens be reading to your toddlers in libraries? How many remember that picture I showed you? In California, drag queen was reading stories to little toddlers in their school, in their preschool. And so this man wrote an article about that. Well, then this other man writes back to him, because, you know, anytime we teach or we preach or it goes out on YouTube, we always have people that want to comment back. Some of them are great. Some of them I'm not sure what they're thinking. This man says this to him. His name is Jesus Ruiz. He says, quote, I'm a devoted Christian. I read God's word. I see no problem with a drag queen reading to a toddler. When did God ever say someone in a costume is a threat? I think we should focus on bigger issues. If the Lord is my shepherd, I'm pretty sure he's not leading me towards ignorance and hate. Patience and love is the shop I'm on. Won't you join with me? That's what he wrote. He says, yes, you read that correctly. A devoted Christian has no problem with drag queens reading stories to toddlers. You know, sometimes I wonder what we're teaching in our churches, or if we're even teaching in our churches. And if you have a problem with it, he says, it's because you are ignorant and you hate people. I don't hate anyone. I have a big problem with a drag queen reading to toddlers. And it's not about a costume, it's about a lifestyle, and it's about going against something God's word says. So he says this, he says, did I say that I'm not making this up? That this was not all part of a bad dream? Well, back in the UK, another headline declared, University of Bristol students vote to ban transphobic feminist speakers. Yes, University of Bristol students have voted to no platform trans exclusionary racial feminists, they're called TERFs by the way, from speaking on campus. TERF is an acronym for trans exclusionary racial feminist, who claim, now follow this, your head's going to spin, who claim that trans women are not women and argue that they have male privileges. So it goes on. How do they argue that a biological male who later transitions to female is not a real female, or at the least cannot relate to the lifelong experiences of a female? What a bigoted transphobic point of view. And it's other feminists who are pushing the ban. My head's spinning already. I can only shake my head in amazement as the radical left continues to devour itself. Yet there's more still evidence that the world has gone loony. Also in the UK comes this shocking headline. Award-winning comedian accuses cancer research of fat shaming for launching campaigns against obesity. According to the story, Sophie Hagen, a Danish-born comedian who has lived in the UK since 2012 and appeared on the BBC multiple times, tweeted a picture of the poster which spelled out obesity with some missing letters and asked readers to guess what the biggest cause of cancer is after smoking. But Hagen is not alone. Others style themselves body-liberating activists, proclaiming that all bodies are good bodies, and speaking out against fat phobia while championing fat liberation. And again, I'm not making any of this up. It's one thing to shame and belittle people for their weight and for their size. We should never do that. It's another thing to deny the health risks of obesity and criticize those like cancer research and their efforts to save lives. Really now, have we lost our minds? For good reason, another journalist tweeted, and listen to this one, speech is violence, moderation is extreme, fascism is anti-fascism, and racism is social justice. Welcome to 2018, where the truth is dead and words mean whatever you want them to mean. The last bit of this thing that he writes is pretty shocking. Yes, there's more. And this from a totally different front. In a headline from the city of Chicago, proposed task force aims to curb shootings at funerals. So Chicago, one of the biggest crime centers in the world, has the most murders of any city in the United States, now has a task force to prevent shootings at funerals. This tragic story notes that funeral services are supposed to be sacred, but it seems nothing will prevent gangs from opening fire on one another. Now the Cook County Sheriff is trying to stop violence from erupting in the middle of cemeteries. Just stop for a moment and just think about what I just read. Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart convened a meeting Thursday of political, religious, and funeral industry leaders aiming at stopping violence in funerals in Chicago. So here's my opinion. You know, I don't have one many times, so I'm going to throw mine in. So let's see what we did. We took prayer out of schools. We kicked God out of the media. We've gone against fundamental Christians. And guess what we end up with? It's not brain surgery. You end up with a godless society. And that's exactly what we're watching. We are reaping the whirlwind. Let me give you this one. In religion, this one's about Pence calls ABC News star Joy Behar to apologize for slander against Christians. So he calls her to do that, and I'm going to tell you some of this article and then some other things that happened. And so she called him up, and she apologized, and he forgave her. And he was on Hannity when he told Hannity that he forgave her, and Hannity said, "Well, I believe in forgiveness too, but you're obviously better at it than I am." But then, if you read this article, ABC wanted to just whitewash it and say nothing about it. But there was so much backlash from Christians, thank God, in America, that ABC had to do something about it. As of when I got this one yesterday, early morning, she had not apologized to the general public. They were trying to blow it over. Last night, as I was reading this, I was told that she did apologize to the general public. And so she obviously apologized. So it's kind of interesting to me to watch all this bashing going on. Let me tell you why they made her apologize. I did a little more research. Because people were dropping their sponsorship of the View, because there's a lot of Christians in America. There's a lot of Christians who believe that they can talk to Jesus and that Jesus will talk to them back. I believe that. He'll inspire you. So obviously that's some good, and thank God it's our vice president. I mean, if you like anybody in Washington, like Pence, he is an amazing Christian man. Let me give you another one that's going on tonight, and I'm going to add one to you that I didn't give last Wednesday. Before I do that, age of confusion for Catholics under Pope Francis. I told them Wednesday, this is going to be YouTubed and go all over the planet, and basically, and it's on Facebook, I'm going to get lots of hate mail for this. But you know what? I really don't care, because this is the truth. And Jesus said the truth will set you free. Amen. And so I'm not going to slight something because of a denomination or because somebody has an affinity towards one denomination or another. If it's the truth, it's the truth. I grew up a Roman Catholic. And so basically what I'm going to read to you about the Pope, it shocks me because I know what a Pope was in Roman Catholicism. So listen to it. Age of confusion for Catholics under Pope Francis. If you think politics today in this country are a mess, it's the same and probably worse for the Catholic Church. What started as a time of hope with the election of Pope Francis has turned into the greatest period of confusion and likely heresy since the Reformation. Confusion is the name of the game, but it isn't a game. Pope Francis, who initially exuded a look of caring and friendliness, has turned into a pope who issues opinion and contradicts established Catholic teaching, while at the same time denying he's doing that, sort of. Much of the confusion stems from his statements in the document entitled Amoris Laetitia, which has been described by many, including clergy, as a ticking time bomb for Catholic morality. In it, the Pope states that some Catholics, living in circumstances that heretofore have been considered sinful, may in fact be acting in conformity with God's law, at least how Francis interprets it. It's okay. Now again, remember, Catholics did not believe, they believed if you got divorced and remarried, you cannot take communion. That's the way the Catholics believed for hundreds of years. So it says, now it's okay for divorced Catholics to remarry and still receive communion. Centuries of teaching and traditions say so, but according to the Pope, it's maybe. Maybe you can do that now. What about the issue of artificial contraception? So Catholics do not believe in contraception. It's one of the reasons why you see some countries like in South America that are predominantly Catholic have many, many children, because Catholics for years and years never believed in it. It has long been a decided fact that it's not licit for Catholic couples to practice it. It's simply immoral and wrong. That's what the Catholic doctrine used to say. But today, apparently there's a movement within Francis's church that says there are times when it's okay. So when? Who decides? It's hard to say, because there are cardinals and bishops across the Catholic world who agree and disagree with the Pope. And the Pope allows the confusion to continue. Then there's the issue of married priests. For centuries it was a no-no. Now, however, under Francis, well, maybe, and it's probably likely, he said. And what about Protestants? Protestants were considered departed brothers when I was growing up. Now they're okay. And homosexuals, Francis says, who am I to judge? What is the truth about the accusations, in many cases proof, that there is a widespread climate practice of homosexuality within the Vatican, and indeed in many churches and dioceses across the world, and Francis is not dealing with it? And how about Muslims? Here's what he said about Muslims, quote, "We all pray to the same God." Now, let me tell you something. He's against capitalism, so I'm going to tell you what I believe about the Pope. It's a rare time for me tonight because I'm giving you two opinions. I gave you one before, and I'm going to give you another one. Here it is. This is not written by anyone else, so if you're writing, just write to me. My name is COrrell, and you can write to me. Just follow the link on this page that you're looking at. Here's my opinion. This Pope is a globalist, he's a secular humanist, and he's a communist. Let me tell you why. Because he hates capitalism. He thinks that the wealth of the world should be distributed to everyone because of the needy. That may sound humanitarian, but it is communism. Communism says you take from the haves and you give to the have-nots. Capitalism, there's nothing evil about capitalism in its basic form. It says this: you want to work hard? The harder you work, the more money you should make. And so if you don't want to work, you don't make any money. It's biblical, and Pope Francis needs to hear it. If you don't work, you don't. That's scripture. And so he is totally, let me tell you something, Hitler and Mussolini would have loved this guy. And if he lives long enough and we're in the right season, Antichrist will definitely love him. Let me give you a little bit more as we go on. Wow, I'm going to get some letters on that one. U.S. Episcopal Church to stop calling God Father. So, U.S. Episcopal Church to stop calling God Father. The Church Diocese of Washington, D.C. Boy, that's surprising. Passed a resolution last week to stop using masculine pronouns for God in future updates to its Book of Common Prayers. Those who's drafted the resolution claim that using gender pronouns like he, him, and his to refer to God act to limit our understanding of God. They stated, by expanding our language for God, we will expand our image of God and the nature of God. One minister and delegate observed that many people she knew were unable to accept a male image of God. The Episcopal Church is one of the most liberal Protestant denominations in the United States. Ridding the Bible of gender pronouns God himself inspired to be written, by the way, 2 Timothy, will certainly change how people understand the image and nature of God, but will accomplish this through the function and fabrication of unbiblical inaccuracies and discrepancies. Rather than reveal a clearer image of who God really is. These are efforts by special interest groups to erase the masculine leadership God clearly outlines in the pages of the Bible. I disagree with the end part of this statement. I don't think it's by special interest groups. I think this is a ploy by Satan himself. And let me tell you why. Because I think it's Satan trying to recreate man. I think what man's saying now is, let us make God in our image. It's a recreation. We are made in God's image, but we're now saying, let's make God in our image. We want him to be a female. Next thing you're going to see is they're going to be calling God transgender. They're going to do everything they possibly can to make him into their image. Lastly, tonight, I want to give you one last bit of news, and it's pretty exciting to me. This is most recently happened, and I want to show it to you. If you've been to Israel with me, and some of you are going, that's Tel Megiddo. That's the city of Megiddo. It's in Armageddon, right in the valley. That city's on a hill. It's a tell. It rises up. There was 21 civilizations that lived there. Megiddo was built on Canaanite city that Joshua would conquer. Well, this week they found something there. Now I've stepped all over this city. I've been all over this area. I don't remember this because it wasn't found yet. They found a 3,600-year-old tomb that was not touched ever. Now listen to this. The archaeologists found this next to a Canaanite palace, and it contains the remains of a royal family. It stunned the archaeologists who found it complete, and again, not touched in 3,600 years. They've been searching the site of Megiddo, by the way, for 110 years, and they've never found this thing. When they got inside, they found the remains of 3 people. They're still there. They found gold and silver and ivory. They found a gold necklace with a snake on the top of it. They didn't find the box, the wood had rotted away, but ivory carvings on top of the wood. Let me tell you what this means. This is a Canaanite tomb way before Joshua. It's 200 years after Joseph was sold into Egypt. And so this is something where eventually Joshua would come and kill the descendants of the people that lived in this palace. So they're still unearthing things in Israel. It's really an amazing spot. And let me give you a hint. I've already decided that when we go to Israel and we go to Megiddo, that we're going to get a special tour of this place if we could possibly do it. So you'll be one of the first ones ever to see it. That's in the news tonight. Let's thank God that he's on top of the news.